And good evening, and welcome to the Icecast Live. My name is Shane Chebsey, and next to me is the wonderful Sam Morgan. Hi, Sam.
Hello, Shane. How are you doing, mate? How's it going?
I'm good. I'm really good, mate. Yeah, a bit pumped up because we've got a really good guest, someone who I really like and I love talking to. It's always a pleasure to speak to him. And he is, of course, a bit of a legend.
Yeah, we've had some people on this, but this is up there.
This is up there. This is up there. This is one of our top guests. Yeah. Of course, we're going to be talking to the mighty Dave Gibbons tonight, who, when did I meet Dave? I met Dave in 2006. He's probably thinking, I don't remember that. But it was at the first Bix, and and he was a guest, obviously, at the show. And I seem to remember him ringing me up and winding me up in a taxi, telling me that, I don't know what the wind-up was. Maybe he'll remember, but he proper had me. He really did. I remember really panicking. I think he said something I think it was something like my hotel room's my hotel room's locked or something like. I don't know what it was, but he proper had me. He really, and that was pretty much a sign for what was to go on. Every opportunity he sort of took the piss, but that's all right. It's Dave Gibbons. You know.
Well, I think I first met Dave when I was 15.
Really?
Yeah.
Elaborate.
That. UCAC 87.
Oh.
And a little sketch there, Dread on the back.
Oh, yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Excellent.
And Luca McMahon and Robin Smith. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I literally was 15.
Yeah, I mean, you must have been enormous. I mean, the thing is, there's just so much, isn't there? There's no way we're going to get through everything that Dave has done in 45 minutes to an hour. It's just impossible. But,
no.
But we are going to concentrate on the new book, which is out, which Dave's going to tell us all about, which is an autobiography. So that hopefully we're going to hear some stories that we've never heard before. Of course, we've heard quite a few stories from Dave over the years, but I'm really looking forward to this. We've had some comments already. Nick, hello, Nick. Nice to meet you. I love comments like that. Just hello.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that leading somewhere? From Ben. Hi, Ben. This is going to be immense. Ooh. I agree.
Yes. Let's get on with it. Let's
roll that VT, Sam.
All right.
You've got to think. And welcome back to the Icecast Live. And welcome, Dave Gibbons. Hi, Dave.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. How's it going?
Pretty good, mate. Pretty good. Thank you for coming on the show. It's an absolute pleasure. It really is. I've been meaning to get you on for a while, but we just didn't get around to it. And you didn't have a new book out, so but now you have. So we're going to be talking about that, of course, but obviously we'll also be talking about other stuff as well. But how have been things with the book, Dave? We were talking offline earlier, and you said you're really happy with how things have gone.
Here, I think.
Oh, we lost you for a second.
Oh,
we've lost Dave for a second. Let's see if we can get him back.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Can you hear us now, Dave?
Even about as well. Don't know what happened there.
There we go.
Oh, technology failure. That happens all the time, mate. Don't worry about it. We just power on through. It's live performances. That's how it goes. So before we lost you, I was just asking how things have gone with the new book. We were talking offline. You said you were really pleased with how things are going.
Yeah, well, we had a few delays. I mean, we started it actually before the coronavirus and everything like that, but things got bogged down a bit. We had some supply chain issues, and we actually had to postpone the publication date. We were going to come out before Christmas, which would have been great, but instead we're coming out now at sort of end of February, beginning of March. But it doesn't seem to have damaged it too much at all, actually. I mean, I think perhaps after Christmas there's a bit of an absence of good comic book books,
There we go.
As you can see, it's a proper book. And so we launched it. Actually, the very first signing I did was at my local comic book shop in St Albans in Hertfordshire, where I've been a regular for many years, and they're good friends of mine. And it felt really good to kick the whole thing off, close to home, particularly as a lot of the stories in it actually happen in St Albans or close by. And we then did an official launch. We did an official launch up in Glasgow, and we did an event the day before yesterday up in London. And we sold out of books at every one of those, which is really, really good considering that it is quite an expensive book. And I've got another London signing coming up in a couple of weeks. We had to postpone one because, unfortunately, I managed to come down with the COVID for the second time. So
the dreaded COVID.
I know we had to let people down there. I think it's about the only signing that I've ever missed. But anyway, we've rescheduled it. And I think it's published in the US actually today. So I'm expecting that activity is going to pick up a bit. So
excellent.
You are bang on where it's happening live. You're bang on where the absolute
heard it here first, folks.
So was that Chaos Comics in St Albans?
Chaos City Comics, yes.
Chaos City. You know what? I was there today. I was working in.
Really?
I was literally in there today. Yeah. It's a nice place. Yeah, downstairs, all the back issues downstairs.
Yeah, it's a fantastic comic shop. It's like the best local comic shops. They're not just places to buy comics. They've got a little community going.
Yeah,
it's got a great friendly atmosphere. And so I always do everything I can to support it. And they've hosted a few signings and things for me across the years. So it was, as I say, it seemed like a really good place to start. Absolutely down home.
Well, that's really nice. I mean, it is a great shop. I used to go to that shop occasionally because for a while I used to move between Dunstable and Shrewsbury for work.
Right.
And occasionally the train would take me through St Albans on the way to Dunstable. And of course, any town that you go to you've never been to before as a comics fan, you find a comic shop.
Absolutely.
And it is a proper, it is a real proper comic shop. It was. I didn't realize that was your local comic shop though, Dave. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. We've had some comments already, so I'm just going to bring them in for a second. Great to have Dave on. What a legend.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. You look familiar to me, Lawrence. I think we must have met quite recently somewhere. I'm not quite sure where.
Well, Lawrence knows Brian Barland, I think, because yes, he bought some artwork off him once.
It's a small world.
Yeah. So that might be the tenuous link. And Lawrence is a writer of comics. I publish him actually. We write a comic called Hedrick. Little plug in there. What's he saying here? Doctor Who work was a real highlight for me.
Yes.
Yes, of course. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it, Dave? I mean, in the comments, we're probably going to get loads of people saying, this was my favourite, this was my favourite. But obviously, we're talking about your autobiography now. Within that career, that long career, what was your, and this is, you've probably been asked this a lot, but what was your personal favourite to work on as an artist?
Oh, man.
I know it's hard, isn't it?
That's so hard to say. I did get asked a similar question the other day, and it's a bit like, who's your favorite child? You like different things about different aspects of everything you've been involved with. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose that my greatest success, if you like, was Watchmen. And I mean, it's been a bit overshadowed by the years that have gone past and, it taking on all the different forms it had. But working on that at the time was a huge thrill because it was a great script. It was Alan and I given complete carte blanche to do exactly what we wanted, to do the kind of comic that we'd always wanted to read. So that was a lot of fun. I also liked the time when I was working on Doctor Who. I used to really enjoy drawing Doctor Who. And for a while there, I was alternating between that and stuff for 2000 AD. So I felt I was really blessed then because I was doing kind of two jobs, both of which I really loved. But I think that the trick of it is you've got to find somewhere in anything you do, something that you enjoy. You know, even if you've got a really bad script, you can always think to yourself, I can't really make this any worse. So you can be a bit experimental, you know, think, okay, well, you know, this isn't going to set the world on fire, but maybe if I do this and I do that, it might make it a bit more interesting. So I always try and find something in any job. And what goes along with that is I've never really, although I have been quite fortunate in the things that I've done have been quite successful. I've never chased the money, you know, I've never chased the big selling books or the latest fad. And I think the result of that means that you tend to work on things that you enjoy rather than you have that feeling when you're just doing it for the money. Oh my God, this is terrible. And I'm not even getting well paid for it, you know? So, so that's kind of, but then, I mean, I've been lucky to work with so many great people, both draw strips for great writers and write strips for great artists, that I've, you know, I have had a long career. I was absolutely amazed to realize that I've actually been doing comics professionally for 50 years.
Wow,
that's amazing. So since I'm 50 this year, so I'm just like my whole life, Dave, you've been writing comics. That's incredible.
And I must say, there's very few things in that 50 years that I don't have some sort of affection for. There's some things that you did in a bit too much of a rush, or you know, you could have done it better. But fortunately, those are pretty few and far between.
So now we've got you on, Dave. I have to tell you my Watchmen story, because I, like most people watching this, and I know Shane as well. You know, we all have been affected by Watchmen. It's influenced everyone. Definitely. And it came out, was about 95, 86. 86. So I would have been about 16, 15. And I first off got it from the comic. I went to my local comic shop in Cardiff, and they said, buy this. If you don't like it, you can come back and we'll give you the money back. So I cycled home, read it, came back, and I went, can I get the next ones? And they sold me issues 1 to 4 of Watchmen. Right. So, and then I started buying it as it was coming out. Right. And as it came out, it was getting delayed. And then I remember the last issue was there was quite a long delay before it came out. And I was every week going and said, is it in yet? Is it in yet? And they said, it's next week. It's coming in next week. But I was going away for a scout trip for a week in Brownsea Island when I was 15. And I went to the scout trip, and, you know, I was absolutely exhausted and mentally exhausted for a week in Brownsea Island. And I got back home, and my dad had gone to the comic shop and bought Watchmen on the Saturday. Because, you know, he questioned some of the weird magazines that are on the walls in the comic shop in the basement of the antique market. But and then I just read it straight away, exhausted and mentally exhausted, and it, you know, just blew my tiny little mind. Oh, good. It was just incredible, and ever since it's just affected me. I just wanted to tell you my Watchmen story because it was amazing.
Thanks. Well, on the subject of Watchmen being late towards the end, this has come up before, and there is a slight confusion that goes on, because my very good friend Brian Bolland, who, as I established, I was on stage with a couple of nights ago, he worked on Camelot 3000, and the last issue of that was, I believe, about a year late. He also worked on Killing Joke, and that took rather longer than anybody expected, although they didn't really set a deadline for it. But in the case of Watchmen, at the very beginning of it, Alan and I had told them what our schedule was, when we thought we could get it done. So they let us go ahead on that understanding. But then they decided they wanted it to come out a bit earlier. So they moved the deadline, which put us under pressure. But it meant that the 11th issue of Watchmen, the penultimate issue, I believe shipped 6 weeks late or something like that. And then I think the final issue shipped 2 months after that. But it would have been exactly on time if they kept to our original schedule. And it was a thing that was a matter of pride to me and Alan, because what the feedback we got from comic shop owners was the great thing about Watchmen was it was there every month. And of course, as you know, people come in specially to get their favorite book. And in coming in to get their favorite book, they pick up a few other books as well. So it was a thing we were really sorry about. But I think in folk memory that actually some of the sins of my good friend Brian have been attributed to me and Alan. We were late, hands up to that, but it wasn't our fault and we weren't that late.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the official word. With Watchmen, I've always been fascinated by this idea that, because obviously it was set at the time in an alternative sort of world, but it was present day. It was set in 1985. And then later on the movie came out and it was sort of a retro approach. So what I was wanting to ask was, how do you think that how would you think Watchmen the comic would be received now if it was, I mean, it's hard to answer because it's affected so many comics after it, but how do you think it would be received now as an original material? Would you think it would still be as hugely successful? Do you think people would receive it as positively?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, if you look at an issue of Watchmen and an issue of today's comics, there's a huge difference in appearance and density and art style and coloring style. And I presume you're also, in your what if scenario, you're thinking if it was set in the present day.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's the thing. Is if it was set now,
well, it sort of wouldn't quite work because the thing that we had was there was in the 80s, and I remember it quite vividly. It was a terrifying
the nuclear threat. Yeah.
And that nuclear war was black and white. It was the US versus Russia, and if the war started, we were all dead. You know, it was that was the game, and those were the stakes. Nowadays, the threats to world peace have become more amorphous. I mean, I won't outline them all, but the rise of global terrorism and bad actors in certain states mean it's very hard to focus on what is the real big threat. Yeah, and it's not as clear cut. I think we were able to do something that was you could almost view as a philosophical kind of thesis. You know, that there are these terrible weapons. If there were superheroes in a world like that, what would the world be like, and how would that affect the balance of power? So I think it was really good that when Zack Snyder made the film, they kept it in the time that we'd written it for, which was the 80s. Absolutely. And I thought the masterpiece with the TV series, the HBO Damon Lindelof thing, was they kept that in real time. So in other words, in that you were seeing where things had now evolved to in the present day. But I don't think Watchmen, you could have had the story and the setting and everything that we did if you set it in the present day. I just don't think it would have worked. And also it was too far away from like the golden age of superheroes. You know, we got a lot to play out of the equivalent of the Justice Society and the equivalent of the Justice League, which again, you couldn't have. There's kind of too many characters, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things I loved about it, was that it established its own history. You know, these old, you know, I mean, in the book, it was just so well conceived, and it was so immersive with the three elements of the book as well. You know, the black freighter and the news reporter and all that sort of stuff. And I loved the way it sort of all became one. But when the first time I read it, I was, I think, 15 or something like that, or 14, and
you skipped over the black freighter stuff.
No, I read the whole thing, but my tiny little brain really struggled, and not with understanding it, but with just being so immersed in a story. You know, it was just incredible how it pulled you in. And from your point of view, Dave, that must have been quite a challenge, that because you established quite some rigid rules for yourself for this book, didn't you? And was that to help you sort of navigate it as a story?
Yeah, well, I knew that it was going to be a very complicated story, so I suggested to Alan that we rather simplified the page layouts because we could cram a lot of story in like that. And also, as it happened, incidentally, it gave Alan a lot of control because he would know exactly where on each page a certain image was occurring, which makes a difference to the way that you would write the sort of
page turns and
the beats of the story. And again, by making it on that grid, which was very unusual for that time, that was the time of kind of poster type layouts for comic book pages. And together with the colouring as well, which I got John Higgins to do in a very distinctive way. You could look at any page of Watchmen and you would know it was a page of Watchmen. It couldn't have been any other comic book. So we did create this whole separate space for it. And the other thing that worked really well was, you know, one of the basic premises was if these characters existed, what would the world really be like? Because, you know, in your typical superhero story, Superman or whatever, Superman is there, but the rest of society is completely unchanged by that.
Why is the Marvel universe like our universe when you've got the Fantastic Four and inventing all these things?
And it also, the wonderful thing was it relieved me in particular of any continuity. In other words, I didn't have to be continuously referencing New York City or anything like that. I could do it as a kind of a vision, or a could have been New York City. So for all those reasons, it just and it was the medium is the message or whatever. The fact it was in an alternative world was symbolized by the way that amongst comics, Watchmen was in an alternative world. It wasn't in the DC Marvel universe. It was somewhere different. And it also, because it was an alternate world story, it made me start to think of it as not a superhero story, but as a science fiction story, an alternate world science fiction story, which completely changed my look at it. You know, that it wasn't a superhero universe. It was a science universe that had manifested itself in these weird characters.
Like the fact that there's that curry is the popular dish because and different things like that. The way the impact on society that the superhumans and the changes in history have impacted the story. It's great.
Yeah, and of course, I remember sitting down when Alan and I had spoken about it for a while, and we were talking about how the world would be different. And I said, "Oh, well, I'll put my thinking cap on and see how many alternative versions of things I could come up with." And I remember making a list, and it was fast foods, it was fashion. You know, everybody wears double-breasted jackets, everybody's got narrow trousers, everybody smokes these weird sort of pipe-like tobacco devices. Electric cars, my God, we saw the future there. You know, Then, you know, Alan was able to tie in with
pirate comics instead of superhero comics because you've already got superheroes.
That's it. Pirates were the thing.
So that whole setting up with it was you know, a very creative, gave me a very creative outlet, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I think, you know, it was because we had complete control. We didn't have to reference an old costume or go by some plot point that had been established in an old issue of Green Arrow or something like that. You know, we felt completely free. And we were able really to express our love of comics. People always think of Watchmen as quite a negative, downbeat thing. I never really thought about it like that. I think it's unflinching and it's real. But I think it couldn't have been done if Alan and I hadn't loved superheroes and you know, grown up being involved with them.
And it was great that you were able to sort of adapt. I mean, they're basically versions of the Charlton characters, as everyone knows. And of course, those characters have their own histories as well. And although you didn't have to reference those histories, you were still able to use sort of the iconography of those specific characters.
Yeah. Well, we discovered that we had the sort of basic archetypes of costume characters, you know, the Superman, the detective, the, you know, or the kind of glamorous pin-up kind of superheroine and all that kind of stuff. I'll just tell you one little aside. When they made the film of Watchmen, they were very, very attentive to what Alan and I had done and tried to pay tribute to us and try and keep as faithful to that as they could. I went and walked around the movie set in Vancouver while they were making the film. And there was a street scene which had, like, as you're saying, curry restaurants in it and, you know, hydrants, power-up cars and everything. And then I noticed on a second floor building, you tend to get these in American cities, they're on the second floor in these kind of areas. It was a martial arts studio. It said martial arts studio. And it was the Judo Master martial arts studio. Judo Master was another one of the Charlton comic characters.
Yeah.
They didn't fit in with what we were doing. But the guys on that film were so focused on it, they thought, yeah, that's what we'll do. It'll be Judo Master.
That's a set dresser with a good knowledge of comics.
Absolutely.
That is so good. You know, I never spotted that in the film. I'm assuming it's like a flash in the film. It's like a
you probably catch it in your peripheral vision, but it is there.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Before we move on to outside of Watchmen, because obviously we want to talk about other stuff as well, there's a couple of comments I'm just going to share with us. So, Sweet Nightmares, would be interesting to hear Dave's thoughts on the upcoming Rogue Trooper.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Beat to it. What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, I mean, I as you know, I co-created Rogue Trooper with Jerry Finley Day.
And you also rebooted as well.
And I rebooted it and got it all completely wrong. It obviously wasn't what the readers quite wanted. Because the thing that I never liked was the biochips. So I got rid of them. And practically the only reaction they got to what I did was, what's happening? Bring back the biochips. So that was a good message to my ego, you know. To be honest, I don't know a lot about the reboot of it they're doing. I mean, as I think is fairly common knowledge now, there is at least a rumor about, and it's been so for many years, that there should be a movie of it, and maybe one day there will. So I don't know whether the reboot in 2000 AD has got anything to do with that. And to be honest,
I'm not 100% sure it's a full reboot. I think Garth is just sort of redoing, sort of going back to first principles. And
it's Garth, is it?
Garth Ennis, and
I think I knew that actually, but I forgot.
Patrick Godson.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's very good. No, I mean they're a fantastic team. I mean they're people who know exactly what they're doing. I look forward to seeing it very much indeed, and particularly with Garth writing it, I kind of know it's in safe hands. In fact, we've talked before about maybe me and him doing a Rogue Trooper thing, but I don't think that is gonna happen. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed Rogue Trooper, and God knows, next to Dredd, I think he's one of the sort of longest running and most popular 2000 AD characters. Yeah. And I think, like a lot of these characters, they can take a reboot, they can take a kind of bending or a change of direction. They're strong enough to weather it. So yeah, I look forward with interest to reading it.
Yes, we've had a couple of weeks in the prog, I think.
We've had a response to that from Chris Askham. Dave, your Rogue Trooper reboot was spot on. It was everything that came after that ruined it when they tried to tie it all together.
Now, that's my kind of reader. That's my kind of reader. Thanks, Chris. I do appreciate that. I was quite happy with it. I was quite pleased with the way it turned out. And people have occasionally said the same thing to me that you have. But I think everybody's favourite, apart from ours, is the one with the biochips. So we'll just have to live with it.
Well, the art was is it Will Simpson? That was pretty incredible, because it was just in full color when the prog, pretty soon after the prog went full color. Yeah, and I think they tried to merge your version, the original Rogue, and Friday, or rather make them two separate characters. In the end, it seems like a bit of a mishmash.
I could never follow all that. I did actually much later on just draw a kind of one-off Rogue Trooper story, and it somehow involved the original Rogue Trooper and Friday. But to be honest with you, I was more interested in trying out my new computer and artwork software, and I didn't pay that much attention to the story. But no, I never quite made sense of it. And I think once in a while you just got to clear the decks and just start from first principles. I mean, that's more or less what they've done with characters like, say, Batman. Just sort of say, let's start again. And
I've done that a few times. Yeah, I think it is necessary though, because as time goes on, the sensibilities of the audience change completely, don't they? And you've got to adapt to that.
But you also want the continuity. People love the continuity. That's why Doctor Who is still the same story. It's never been rebooted. It's that people like the continuity. I think it changed it all, but but keep the same character. That's kind of, I think
well,
people like that.
I
like that.
I think Stan Lee said that the real secret to writing ongoing comics is to give the illusion of change. You know, I think when it gets quite stagnant, that's when it needs a good stir up. And as I say, if it's a good character, it will take a lot of treatment and a lot of bending and shaping. You know, but yeah, it's true. Audiences do change, but then there's a great interest these days in back issues. I mean, Rebellion have got a very successful line of reprints of all the earlier stuff, so you can have the new stuff and you can have the old stuff as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I think
if a bad version will never take away from the original. It's all there on the shelf.
It's always there.
There's always
shelf, yeah.
There's always going to be a lot of appetite for that. I think we've got a comment actually on that from Nick. Has 2000 AD been censored a lot post noughties? I miss 2000 AD from the 90s. Well, that's an interesting one.
Well, I get a copy of it every week, which I always look through. I can't say it strikes me as being censored. In fact, in recent months, I've been quite surprised by some of the stuff they have got away with. But I think, again, as you were saying, that the audience does change. And I mean, the audience for 2000 AD now is very skewed towards middle-aged people, not children so much. And the way it's racked in the shop and everything as well. So I think, I think it's perfectly acceptable. It seems to me that it's not a thing for children, and I can't see any reason why it shouldn't be.
Well, what they do is they do the regen prog every couple of months.
Yes.
How do you feel about that, doing a specific prog for children?
Well, I think that's quite an interesting thing to do. I mean, from a creative point of view, it's not unusual. I mean, DC do that with a lot of their characters, and Marvel as well, I believe. And I suppose it's a sneaky way of being the on-ramp to the rest of the line, really. But I find creatively what they do with the regene to be quite an interesting thing. And it doesn't, there's something about aiming work at an audience which is not the same as censoring it. I think it's just
totally.
And people are interested in different things when they're different ages anyway, and certain things don't really connect properly. So I'm all for diversity of content.
I think sometimes it's the balance you've got to keep, isn't it? That if you're doing stuff for a younger audience, is that you don't sort of go too low down and sort of talk down to them. That was what I always loved about 2000 AD. It always felt like I was too young to read it, and that's why I wanted to read it. I was about 9 or 10, and like and my older cousin was 10 years older than me, and he'd be reading it and be like, "Oh, that's a bit naughty," that's a bit risky. And it wasn't. It was violent, I guess.
Yeah.
But that, but if you go too low, it's sort of like talking down to the kids a bit, and that sort of doesn't work.
Yeah, you never dumb down. Don't dumb down.
That's the worst thing you can do. But I mean, if when I tell people, or when they ask me what I do, and I say that I work in comics, they always go, "Oh, the Beano and the Dandy." And actually, if you look back at the Beano and the Dandy, although the publishers were in fact, very conservative people, there's a lot of anarchy going through those comics. And there's also some fantastic creativity and amazing artwork. You look what Leo Baxendale used to do, or Ken Reed. They're done for children, but they're not done for idiots. They're done by crediting the reader with a sense of humor and a bit of intelligence. And I think that's the thing with 2000 AD as well, that it's always been a bit tongue in cheek, and it's always stood for the things that young people do really like, which is a bit of disruption and a bit of non-conformity and a bit of a private joke and an area where your parents don't understand it. I mean, I never ever believed there would come a day when I didn't like certain music. But I actually more or less found myself saying to my stepdaughters, "What is that row?" And then, of course, you realise that the whole point of it is, if they like the same music I did, there'd be something very, very wrong going on there. It's like if my dad would like the music that I love. So it's great. We don't all have to have the same thing. And that's one of the things that gets me, and I'm not going to get into a discussion about this, about online. If you do a variant take on something, you're the most terrible person in the world. You've ruined something. It isn't so at all. you've got to have change, and you've got to give people independence, and you've got to let people feel that they're doing something which is special and just for them.
Absolutely.
I totally agree, Dave. It's I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff, isn't there, online all the time about how they change characters and in one way or another. But at the end of the day, the original characters from these people's childhood, it's still there. It hasn't gone away. You can still go back and read it. And yeah, there's a lot of the modern stuff that doesn't suit my sensibilities, a lot of it. But at the same time, there's a lot of gems. But you can always go back. I can always go back to my collection and read a classic X-Men or whatever it is that tickles my fancy, or Watchmen. They're not going anywhere. In fact, they're more available now than they've ever been. Because when I was a kid, trying to find comics was hard. But now it's everywhere. I mean, we're very lucky, I think, to be able to access all of this classic material, both this side of the pond and overall, and the manga as well. I mean, what are your thoughts on manga, Dave, and how that's developed and sort of taken over in a bit?
Well, I was going to say, following on from our previous few thoughts there, that there are 3 words that I've learned to use in my maturity. If there's something that's not quite to my taste, it's not for me. It's wrong, or it's bad, or it shouldn't be, or it ought to be different, or how dare they do this. It's just, there's lots of things that are for me. Some things aren't for me. And the thing with manga is, intellectually, I appreciate it, and I can see what an incredible force it is. And you only have to look in even a British bookshop. There's shelves full of manga. There's probably more manga than there are kind of indigenous graphic novels. So it obviously strikes a very strong chord. I think one of the chords it strikes is that it's a bit different and it's a bit private, and your family, your parents don't understand it. It's got its code, and it's got its particular,
it's a click, isn't it? It's a click, isn't it? And that's why I loved 2000 AD when I was a kid, and it's exactly and that's the thing that escapes some folks, I think, is that it's the exact same reason that these kids love manga is the exact same reason we loved 2000 AD.
My kids absolutely love manga. They wouldn't touch a comic. I've got plenty of comics they can read, but no, they only like manga.
Well, I mean, that was true with my son growing up. I mean, he obviously grew up in a house full of comics, but the only kind of Western comic he liked was Transformers, which was because he collected the Transformer toys, which were Japanese toys. Then he got to like anime and manga, not in a huge fanboy way, but he was interested in that in a way that he never was about my superhero or science fiction comics. And like I was saying with regard to popular music, that's a good thing, And I would also have to say that manga is much more kind of women friendly as well. In the days when a lot of American comic books were sort of male power fantasies, if you look in an average manga, they're about people's feelings and emotions and romances and social misunderstanding and those kind of things. I must say though, because I'm so familiar with and so entrenched in kind of Western comic books, the closest I've ever really come to reading any quantity of manga was with Akira.
Me too.
He's a kind of halfway house, but that's
also it's published in the right way as well. I struggle with the backwards reading right to left and stuff. I really do.
Although
it's like no problem.
It's an interesting thing because there have been Japanese editions of a couple of my books, and I wonder what they would look like reading the wrong way around. But of course they don't. They read the Western way around because the Japanese kids want to have, like, again, something that's not part of the normal culture.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, but it's great. No, I mean, I just think they're all variations on the same thing, and inevitably, Western comics influences bleed into manga, and they do round the other way as well. And it's all part just the gorgeous mixing pot of watching all these influences pop up, and then they go from being really rather outlandish things that people aren't ready for to things that are just a normal part of the landscape. And that's the way it goes, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I was fascinated by the fact that manga originates from that Western influence, going back into Japan. The manga came from a Western influence, and now it's coming back to influence us, and our material. So it just goes round in circles, really.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as well where the trend in Western comic publishing is towards full color, really lavishly bound, special edition, high quality printing books. Manga is sort of quite scruffy, kind of phone book sort of format, which I quite like. Something about when you're a kid and you buy a comic and read a bit of it and roll it up and stick it in your back pocket, I mean, I haven't done that for decades, but I used to do it, particularly with the Beano.
God, now they're like £6 each. If you want to do
that. You're not going to do it now,
yeah. So it's interesting to see the way things evolve. But as long as people are reading and producing comics or their equivalent stories in words and pictures, the happier I'll be, and the more diverse the subject matter and the characters and the situations they explore, the happier I am. I think that's where true creativity and enjoyment lies.
Definitely. So moving on within your book, then, Dave, is it a full sort of autobiography, or do you concentrate on like certain periods in your career?
Here it is.
Here it is. Give him full screen, Sam.
It exists. Let's get the full screen on that one, Sam.
Look at that. Oh, that's chunky.
So it's got lots in it. It's pictures, it's artwork, it's text. It's about 250 pages, I think, about 100,000 words of text. Lots of artwork, as you can see, some that has been seen before. Most of it, I don't think, has been particularly seen. There isn't much from Watchmen and things like that in it, because that's been quite well covered. But it does cover my whole life, from being a kid on Boxing Day, copying a picture of Superman out of a Superman annual when I was 7 years old, to stuff that I did 60 years later. So it's a pretty comprehensive thing, but it's not in chronological order. It's in alphabetical order.
That's
so it's a series of anecdotes that are, So you can pop in and out of it, which is the way I tend to read a book anyway, rather than plow through it. So you don't have to sit through all the boring stuff about me being at school and all that. So you can start reading any way you like. But as you piece the bits together, it does pretty much cover my life in comics. And it is.
Does it feature your media appearances? Like the Superman radio play. I remember you were in that, weren't you?
There's some artwork of that. There's also lots of photos of when I dressed up as a superhero.
Big E.
Yeah, and there's and famous pals of mine in the media that I've run into. So there's a bit of name dropping in it. There's some interesting behind the scenes stuff. There's artwork that I haven't seen myself for decades and decades.
Sorry, go on, Dave. So carry on, Dave. Sorry.
I was going to say that I've done it in collaboration with my friend Tim Pilcher, who's a very knowledgeable and very talented
we know Tim.
editor.
Yeah, good man.
And he was instrumental in me running stuff past him to get his opinion on it. I mean, every word in the book is mine, but it's really useful to have a good editor who can give you some. Oh, there you go. There you go. And that's me dressed up and drawn by me as well. So yeah. Well done for keeping that.
No, I recently got a load of these old 2000 ADs, and just going through them, occasionally there's like 3 stories in a prog drawn by you, like Dread, Robusters, and Dan Dare. It's incredible.
I was young and I needed the money. What can I tell you? but no, I was just going to say, because I want to give Tim his due, that not only was he a wonderful sounding board, but he actually put together the bibliography, because although the thing is in alphabetical order, there is a chronological bibliography at the back and a very extensive and detailed index as well. So it's actually quite easy to navigate your way around it. But it's been out for a couple of weeks now, and it seems to be going down very, very well, as I think I mentioned earlier. I'm really thrilled about it. And what I really tried to do was to write the kind of book that I would like to read. You know, I've got shelves full of books, many of which are autobiographies by comic book artists. And I've always loved myself, that little glimpse behind the scene, and also to put things together. Oh, he knew him, and oh, he used to work on that. There's all that interesting sort of web building going on.
Yeah, it can be quite an incestuous industry, can't it? Comics,
absolutely.
Not in the literal sense, Sam.
Well, no, but no. I mean, there's one anecdote in particular which shows exactly how incestuous it is in a non-sexual way, but yeah, but mainly as well. And I was a bit worried because I thought, if I'm going to write an autobiography, I've got to tell the truth, because otherwise,
the dirt. Yeah.
I don't want to upset anybody. So I was quite careful. But then somebody pointed out to me that actually the butt of a lot of the jokes is me. So if anybody gets rough treatment, it's me. So
that's all right. That's acceptable, isn't it? You can do it.
And anyway, if people had wanted me to write nicer things about them, they should have been nicer to me.
Definitely. You can't escape that.
Yeah,
can you? It's true. It's the rule of autobiography,
I'm sure people will be secretly like, if you dish the dirt on them, they're like, "Oh, I'm, attention."
Yeah, a bit of notoriety,
Yeah.
Well, of course, what everybody does, what all comics artists do, if you get a book like that with an index, you just go straight to your name.
Straight to your name.
Yeah.
You look at the entries for you, and then I either buy it because you like it, or just put it back on the shelf because you don't.
I can't wait to read it, to be honest. I love books like that. I just love them. So going into the book a little bit, you talk about, there are sections in there when you were at school, and was school a good experience for you, Dave? Did you get support for what you wanted to do, or was art something that came later on?
Well, no, I mean, I always wanted to draw. I particularly wanted to draw comics. From the very first time I saw them, I wanted to be a comic book. Well, I didn't know that there was a writer and an artist. I just wanted to be somebody who did comic books, a cartoonist or something, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
But I was quite bright as a kid. I sort of skipped a year at primary school, and I was quite good at, academic subjects. And I ended up passing my 11 plus and went to a very traditional, not quite a Hogwarts public school kind of place, but wannabe kind of place like that, with very Gothic architecture.
It's like a grammar. Was it a grammar school? Did you go to grammar school?
Well, it was actually a private school, but it was a direct grant school, which meant if you were bright and passed your 11 plus, you got your fees paid. And so it was all masters wearing dark gowns and prefects. Wow. You could wear a boater in the summer, so it was quite, quite traditionally English.
Yeah. It's like an issue of the Beano.
Well, yeah. And they vehemently disliked any form of American culture. And there is an anecdote that I told before that is in the book, which I will let you read in detail. But basically, they confiscated a load of comic books and burnt them. And I remember thinking that day, as I watched the prefects carry these comics to the pyre, I remember thinking, if people like you don't like comics, then I love them. It's like that reverse psychology that you can get to work on children. And then I remember my mum and dad were quite supportive. My dad took me to see the local artist to see if I had any talent. But what I took with me to show him was what I was working on, which was copying a whole comic book line for line, because I just wanted to figure out how they drew it. Yeah. And obviously the artist must have looked at it and thought, well, he's put a lot of work into it, but it's not really very original. So, so then it became, well, look, just get some qualifications and then you can do comics. And that's what actually happened. And my parents in the end did help me by lending me money and things like that. But no, and then years later, they invited me to the school because they were finally opening a proper art room. And they asked me to write a few words on how the school had helped me in my career as a
that was fun.
I said, I'm going to have to say that I succeeded despite the efforts of the school. And I went, okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So that whole anecdote. There's a couple of anecdotes relate to my school experience, and so you can read those in the book. Indeed, I was joking the other day that once this book's out and everybody's got one, when people interview me like you're doing, you can ask me a question, I'll go, I refer you to page 28.
Your Honour.
Yeah, exactly.
Page 52. Page 60.
Does that mean that now this is like going to be one of the last interviews?
It's your last interview, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, some of these anecdotes, I've rolled them out so many times. It's a weird thing, you know, people talk about stage fright. Fortunately, that's something that I've never suffered from. But I do this thing on stage where somebody will ask me a question and I've already told the answer a dozen times. And I go on a little holiday. I think, all right, that's the anecdote about the comics being burned. I can stand there and talk for 5 minutes and I don't even have to think about it. It must be a bit like being a stand-up comedian or something.
Yeah.
You know, you've got certain jokes that you know are going to hit, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I think I was inspired in this thing about just refer a page number. There used to be a joke about the comedians club, you know, where the young comedian goes along. And all these comedians stand up and go, you know, after dinner, and one of them goes 73, and they'll go, oh, fantastic. and another one goes 41, and they go, oh, 41. So the young comedian thinks he'll ever go, so he stands up and he goes 68. So he sits down again embarrassed. He says to the guy, he said, they laughed at all those other numbers. Why do they laugh at mine? He went, it's the way you tell them, mate.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So if you've ruled out a lot of the same anecdotes a lot, what is the one question that you feel you've never been asked or that you want to be asked?
Oh gosh.
The one question. Well, I mean, there's so many things that are unknown.
That's a hard question to ask, Sam.
It's like, what don't I know that I know, or something like that.
Yeah, I suppose another way to phrase it is there something that you would like to talk about that no one ever gives you the opportunity to?
No, I'm quite happy to be guided by the audience, and you know, if I wanted to get in an answer, you know, I mean, I've kind of paraphrased it with comedians. You can paraphrase it with being a politician.
Yeah.
You can ask me any question you like, but you're going to get the answer that I want to give you. You know.
Yeah.
So I like your question, but this is the answer.
Yes. Yes. So I can normally, if there's something I feel needs to be said, I can normally wrestle it round. So I actually say, but yeah, I can't think of an example, but people do come out with the most abstruse things. And of course, there's some questions you get asked over and over again. There's all the Watchmen questions. There's all the what's it like working with Alan Moore questions, you know, which is fine. You know, that's what I'm there for. If people are interested in it, then I'm quite happy to answer it.
Yeah, refer to page 79. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, we've got a few of questions like that in the chat, so I've not brought them up, to be honest, because they are quite common questions. But I did spy when you were going through the book there, flicking through it. I saw some other artists' work, and so obviously they're artists that you've either worked with or you've been influenced by. I spotted a little bit of Dark Knight in there. I saw some Frank Miller. Obviously, you worked with Frank Miller a few times.
Yeah,
Steve Rude, Steve Rude on World's Finest.
Steve Rude,
Mike Mignola.
The mighty Mike Mignola. Yeah. And so it does chronicle all that as well. There's you talk about your influences and the people that you've worked with and those experiences.
Yeah, well, that's what the alphabetical entries are. It might be somebody's name. It might be the title of a comic book. It might just be, you know, school or something, or the name of a convention. It's just a way of shoveling the information in there. I mean, it's really weird though. Since I finished the book, I keep thinking of things that could have been in the book, like why didn't I
part 2?
There you go.
It's part 2, or I did have the thought of I might do something online. You know,
DLC. Get a DLC.
A little blog.
Downloadable content. It's like the extra stuff that you can add, that you can download to it. Yeah.
But that's something that I'm beginning to think of now, because you know, I don't think there's probably another whole book in it just at the moment, but there are still interesting areas that I haven't addressed. And of course, as a result of people asking me questions based on reading the book, there are things that I could make more of, or I could clarify a bit. You know, you never know. Even the biochips might get their own entry in it next time. Unlikely, but it could happen.
You tried to kill them. You tried to get rid of them, but they came back.
So we're getting near the end of the show now, Dave, which is sad because we've really enjoyed it. It did, didn't it? Wasn't too painful, was it, mate?
No.
So we're talking about the future. What's next? What's next for Dave Gibbons?
Well, I mean, it's funny because in a way, having written an autobiography, it feels a bit like, you know, drawing a line under things. I must admit that, given the age I am, and I'll leave it to your viewers to figure it out, I'm at that age where I could arguably be entitled to a bit of a sort of a slightly lazy, you know, retirement. And I have cut back a lot. To be honest with you, I do very little drawing these days, and I certainly don't do things that have got anything like a deadline on them, because I have had 50 years of that, you know. I'm not complaining. It's been great. It's been regular work, but it's obviously not got quite the excitement. But the thing that I do love is life drawing, and I try and go a couple of times a month to a local life drawing class, which is wonderful because it is just drawing for the joy of drawing. You know, it's you're not going to show it to anybody. You don't expect to be paid money for it. There's going to be no critique of it. You just do it and enjoy it. So that's something I find interesting. And who knows, there might even be something creatively down there that I might like to do a book of life drawings that I've done, or write a little bit about that. There's a possibility. That's cool. Yeah, there's a possibility, as I say, of some sort of sequel to the autobiography. You know,
something more like an art book, but a very personal art book of stuff that you've enjoyed, you know, stuff you've done for your own enjoyment.
Yeah.
And then Dave Gibbons Nudes.
Dave Gibbons Nudes, yeah. I'm sure that would spell. But as long as it is Dave Gibbons Nude.
That's a different book.
I mean, I'm sure there's an audience.
Yeah, there's probably an audience.
A small audience, I would think. But anyway, but there's one particular loose end, and it's a funny thing. You know, I did a graphic novel called The Originals, which was about me growing up as a mod. Well, the thing about that is, and he's got it on the shelf behind him.
Oh yeah, I love this. It's absolutely brilliant.
It's called my favorite.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Anyway, sorry.
So at the same time that I was a mod, when I was in my sort of late teens, I also had a holiday job working in an old folks residential home. And I was talking to my friend Pat Mills, you know, Pat from 2000 AD, wrote a bit of Doctor Who, Nemesis, Martial Law. We were together, and we were talking about that. And many years before, I'd spoken to him about a story that involved older people, like old men and women. And I remember when I was telling that to him years ago, he said, "Dave, you really should write that. This sounds like there's a really good story in there." And then years later, we met up again after I'd done the originals. And I said, "You know, Pat, I've been thinking about that old folk story again." And it is sort of the bookend to the originals.
Yeah.
Because we've seen our hero when he's 18 years old. How about if we see him when he's 80 years old? Yeah. And of course, in a weird way, that's the kind of territory that I'm slowly nudging towards. And the more I think about it, the more it kind of seems like it might be feasible. Pat said to me when I finished talking to him about it, he said, "Dave, having heard you talk about this again, I've got to tell you that you have to write this. It will haunt you until you do. The only way you'll ever get rid of it is to actually write it." So there's a chance that I might do something there.
Oh, brilliant.
But,
that would be amazing.
And I mean, I do enjoy, as I get older, I do enjoy writing anyway. I mean, I greatly enjoyed writing my autobiography. I love writing introductions. I have done a few prose stories as well. So I think it's likely that anything I do in the future that's creative is likely to be me writing it rather than drawing it, or with the emphasis very much on the writing end of it.
I would absolutely love to see originals too. The elder years.
Yeah.
That's such a great concept, and you know, and it would appeal to the same audience probably, even though it's about a totally different age group. I think, you know, because it has that sort of real world element to it.
And of course, the thing you overlook is that at the time when I was working in the old folks' home, I don't know if that's the correct way to describe it, but that's what we used to call it. Was the old folks' home.
I think.
These guys that I would look after, who I'd get dressed and shave them and give them a bath and that kind of thing, they had fought in the First World War. And you get them in the bathroom where they could have their little soak in the tub. And I'd read the paper usually, but sometimes we'd get talking. And in the warm mist of this sort of bathroom, the years would drop away and they'd start to talk about not being old and, oh my God, but talking about when they were chasing the girls in France and stealing the wine and everything. And you realise that they were you, because I was 18, they were that once upon a time. So there's that really interesting sort of tension between the two things.
Because hardly anyone ever feels old, do they? Everyone always feels like, you know, they were 18.
We're all 18
years
forever,
ago.
aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, me and Shane are 50, and I'm
a little bit older.
But you don't. You're
I'm
the same until you feel an ache, basically. Until
your
your
body that lets you down, your brain is there.
Yeah,
as a young person, everyone does, I think.
So, you know, as you can tell, even the little bit that I'm recounting to you about this, I can even feel it in myself. There's something quite exciting and inspiring about it. So that might be something that I hope I do get round to doing, because I know once I start doing it, it will just flow. You know. I've just got
I really hope that happens. I so would love to read that story. It sounds, especially after reading originals, and I love originals. It's one of my favorite pieces of work that you've done. And it really
someone's just posted up Charlie's War.
There's
of course, fantastic story by Pat and drawn by the incomparable Joe Calhoun.
Oh yeah.
One of my first jobs working in comics was Joe had gone on holiday for 6 weeks, and I got to ghost his artwork, and that gave me enough money to actually break into comics. But you can read about that in more detail in the book too.
Oh, brilliant! It looks like a lot of people are interested in that idea.
There's my sister Wendy Toole. Hiya, Wend.
Oh,
it's the great stuff.
That's why we've got so many viewers. It's your whole family watching.
Yeah. Well, if Wendy says I've got to write it,
there we go.
There you go. You've
I should be asking her. I should be asking her for notes on it when I write the first draft. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy. Oh, here we are.
Oh, here we go. Yeah,
it's another Gibbons.
No, show it. I'm doing it. You show it, Shane.
Right, I'm just disappointed he couldn't name his favourite child.
It's true. No, I was a joke. Your entire family are watching this.
Yeah.
Well, of course, Daniel is my favourite child because he's the only one I've got.
There you go.
Oh, yes.
I've got shares in some others, you know, but no. Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks. You've always been my favourite. You know that.
We love hosting the guests. You know, families on the show. It's great. It's a nice family feel. Well, Dave, we've reached the end of the hour. It's whizzed by, and thank you so much for coming on the show,
Absolutely.
mate. It's always an absolute pleasure to chat with you. And, you know, to be honest, it's probably the longest chat we've ever had because we never have time. It's always, you know, we're always at shows and we have literally had 5 minutes, you know.
You have the convention conversation. Oh, hi, how you doing? See you later. And that later never comes, you know. It's a great pleasure to speak to you, Shane and Sam, and really, really good having a chat. And I think we managed to go into some areas that I don't normally talk about. So thanks very much.
Pleased about that.
Oh,
well,
brilliant.
I hope the book is a massive success. Sounds like it already is, you know. And so wishing you all the best with it. And we'll see you again soon, I'm sure. Have yourself a great evening, Dave.
And thanks to everybody for watching, not least my sister and my son. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.
So much, Dave. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night for now.